Greetings, opera lovers. It's Rona, live from Pittsburgh. Yesterday I went to my local HD theater to view the Metropolitan Opera's production of Prince Igor by Alexander Borodin. I had already listened to the opening night broadcast via the internet. And what an evening that was. Hearing the most beautiful tunes, great orchestra, fantastic singing. I loved it. It swept me away. I was so looking forward to seeing it because when you only hear an opera and not actually having a libretto in front of you, there's only so much you can get out of it. And I knew I would get much more by seeing it. It was a brand new production. Of course, if you know anything about the history of this opera, you know what a monumental event this was going to be. Just to recap very quickly, Borodin died before he completed the opera. Rimsky-Korsakov and one of his students, Alexander Glazunov, sort of recreated the opera, adding scenes, adding their own music. And over the last few years, there's been a major push to restore the opera to just the music that Borodin wrote. However, he wrote this opera over many, many years. I can't remember exactly, but maybe 17 or 27 years. And it was a lot of tableaus. And so one of the things that I noticed first while I was watching the HG production is that there is a big disconnect in an idea of a plot. The story of Prince Igor is based on a 12th century epic poem of the true Prince Igor and his battles and how he gets to reclaim his throne. But let's get right down to the production. So I sat down in the theater waiting to hear this great opera whose music I love so much. Just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me. I am a musician myself, and I started out on the viola. When I was a very young girl, my viola teacher suggested I join a local symphony orchestra, and in the first season that I played there, we had a guest artist who sang Igor's aria. So when I was 12 years old, I already knew this piece, this Igor's aria, and I loved it. I actually hadn't thought about it until I was probably in my 40s or 50s when I happened to buy a recording of Winterfeld's greatest arias that he has recorded, and in it was Prince Igor's aria, which I hadn't heard since then. And of course, since then I've added it to my repertoire of very favorite arias. So the opera begins, and this aria, whose theme is so beautiful, appears in the opera many times. The opera begins in a great hall, and it's actually very bureaucratic looking. In the original story, we're supposed to be in the 1100s. Obviously, we're not when the curtain rises because we see a brick building and people dressed in kind of 19th, 20th century dress. And the first thing that I thought of when I heard the chorus singing Slava, Slava was the Olympics, which just took place, where Borodin's music was so prominently featured. So it isn't just me that loves this music or people of Russian descent, which I am. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous music. And of course, as most of you know, a lot of this music was borrowed to make up the show, and then the movie Kismet, and other music of Borodin's was also used for that from his string quartet and other things. He was a great melodist. But getting back to the production, we see this very dreary kind of Soviet-era looking building, and Prince Igor is being played by Ildar Abdrazakov, a wonderful bass baritone. And he really had a beautiful stature to him. You could believe that he was the leader of people because he carries himself with such authority and he sings with such a tremendous command. He was definitely the leader of his people. And he's captured, and the prologue ends, and we go into Act 1, the famous act with the field of poppies. And this is where I kind of like just shook my head and began my great journey of disappointment in the production. The director of the opera, I have all this written down because my brain isn't so good. The director is Dmitry Chernyakov. He's quite famous. He's young and has a lot of operas to his resume. He's very well regarded, and I know he put a lot of thought into this production. However, the real first act, which is supposed to be now an allegory of what has happened beforehand, takes place in this large field of poppies with a cerulean blue background. It just didn't get me. The red, the blue, the starkness of the characters coming out one at a time and singing. And then came the very famous Polovetzian dances. One of my just all-time favorite pieces of music. It's rousing, it's beautiful, it's Russian in sounding. And I have to say that the choreography was one of the worst I have seen in an opera. Many times if an opera has a ballet, the ballet is a very low point. This was one of the lowest points of a ballet in an opera that I've seen. The dancers are in the poppy fields, so we only get to see them from their waist up, except when they're jumping, which is a lot. So they kind of sway around from their waist, and then they jump onto other fields, other parts of the poppy fields. And I also didn't think that the music was convincing enough for the kind of exuberance that these dances should have. Maybe it was the production that held back the conductor for fully realizing the excitement that this music can bring. But now I'd like to get to the singers, because all the major singers have already come on stage. So we have Prince Igor, played by Ildar Abdulzakov, a wonderful voice. I was hoping more to be totally wowed by that great Russian sound. He's excellent. I somehow was hoping for something a little richer. I can't help it. The sound of Boris Christoph in my mind as a Russian, well, he's a basso, just is so compelling that it's hard for others to compete with him. There were other Russian singers as well whose voices were incredibly rich. Playing the princess, Prince Igor's wife, was Oksana Dika. I've read all the reviews. She got nice reviews, some not so nice. I would like to say, I'm going to go on the record and say, I thought she was the unsung heroine of the opera. I thought she had so much regalness to her portrayal, and it was so honest. Her singing was wonderful. You can make a complaint that her voice wasn't this or it wasn't that, but I loved it. I thought she did a beautiful job, not only vocally, but portraying the character of Igor's wife. Then there are the two young lovers. And I'm going to be very poor on pronouncing their names. I know I'm gonna mess up her name, and I love her so much. The Georgian mezzo, Anita Rachvelishvili. She's just a fantastic singer. And when she comes on stage in her white flowing gown and that black hair of hers, and she's so exotic looking and earthy, I just loved every second she was on stage. And the tenor, who plays Vladimir, is Sergei Semishkor. He has a very Russian sound to his voice. I'd like to hear him in some Italian operas to see what else he can do with that lovely instrument that he has. Since I'm already over 10 minutes and there's so much more to say, I'm going to make this in 2 parts, and I hope you will catch me in part 2.